Known as faux rock for his ferocious hitting style, David Fulcher spent 8 years brightly in the spotlight of the NFL. We embrace them, cheer for them. They are heroes in our eyes. Yet when their time in the spotlight ends, many go on to do the most important work of their lives. They go into overtime. Welcome to Overtime, life after the spotlight with NFL All-Pro David Fulcher and his co-host, national award-winning speaker David Coleman, exclusively on the Bootleggers Music Group Radio.
Good morning, guys. Another episode of Overtime, life after the spotlight. My name is David Fulcher with my co-host. I always call him D2, David Coleman. We got David Fulcher, David Coleman. Dave, how you doing, my brother?
I'm doing really well. Marty, thank you for coming on the show.
My pleasure, David. I enjoy doing this kind of thing, and with a couple of guys as proficient as you guys are, I feel like we've done this a million times before.
Here's what's really cool. We have arguably the voice of Cincinnati. If the city can be recognized by a voice, Marty, it's you. And there might be a few people out there that say it's a person with the last name Cunningham, but I think I would vote for you. And
no doubt.
Marty, I feel like I know you better than we do because I have flown nearly 4 million miles in my career. And every single time I leave CVG, as I'm walking on my plane, I hear your beautiful voice go, if someone tries to hand you their luggage, say no. And don't leave your luggage alone. I'm like, thank you, Marty. And I get on my flight.
Yeah, let me tell you a couple of things about that. One, I have people coming and said, is there anywhere I can go to escape your voice? I said, no. And then but the second thing, the best thing is when Amanda and I are traveling, and we do a lot of that, and we'll come through the airport, either going to our gate or we're coming off of a trip, and we hear something, and she said, boy, I wish all those people hear your voice every day coming in and out of this airport, know that you don't abide by most of the stuff that you recommend they do.
You know what's funny though, when he says that, there was a guy that asked me to do a commercial. This was many years ago, and I don't drink, and it happened to be a beer commercial. And I'm like, I don't know if I really want to do that, man, because then everybody that knows me knows that I don't drink. So how am I going to endorse a beer that I don't drink? And it's one of my buddies, I think it was Barney Bussey. He said, dude, listen, you don't have to drink the beer to collect the check. And I said, that does make kind of sense, man. But then when they ask me how it tastes, what am I going to tell them? He said, dude, just tell them it's good.
Marty gave you good advice.
Marty, David and I don't drink, so that we go to events. We usually get a Diet Coke or a Coke in a rocks glass, so at least we can say to people, I'm having a rum and Coke. They just don't know the rum's not in it.
That's it. That is it.
At least we look like we're participating.
That's good stuff.
All right, brothers, we're going to get this thing started. Just a simple fact that, man, just having Marty on here, and we're kind of shooting the stuff before we get started. But once again, Marty Brennaman, the voice of Cincinnati, and I've heard Marty for so many years. I remember Marty's one thing I'm going to bring up real quick, and I'm going to pass it over to Dave. The 90 World Series, I think it was the 90 World Series. And Eric Davis and I, obviously, we went to high school together. And I'm going to tell you something, man. There's two guys, and I hope I'm putting this guy in the category with Marty, because I'm a Dodger. I'm a Los Angeles Dodger kid. Vin Scully. Oh my gosh. Marty Brennaman and Vin Scully. Two guys. When I say that you're listening to a game,
right?
If you're on the radio and you're hearing the game, most time you want to be able to see what Marty's seeing, or seeing what Vince is seeing, or seeing whoever's talking if we were watching the game on TV.
Yeah.
When you hear these guys and you hear that voice, they give you the play-by-play on radio. They're not, this is, and when you hear a game and you hear these guys explain that game, it's almost like sitting right there in the stadium listening to that game.
It's like looking at a picture.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. You couldn't pay me a higher compliment, because I don't think there's any question that in my business, and ever since Harold Arlen broadcast a Pittsburgh Pirate game back in 1928 or 29, whatever it was, which was the first ever, Vin was the best. Anybody who labors under the delusion that he isn't are fooling themselves. And on top of that, and I always ask people when they meet some celebrity, and they talk about it, the first question I ask is, what kind of person is he, or what kind of person is she? We all know about talents of individual people, but let me introduce you guys to Millie first. This is the individual that completely and unashamedly runs this house. There's nothing bigger than this young lady right here. And
we've got a few of them, Marty, too.
Yeah, well, you know how it
is, man. They rule the roost.
But then
he on the floor right next to me right now.
Well, God bless you for that. Now, I really am in company with friends now. Not only was he the best that ever lived, but he was also as good a person as I think I've ever known. Yeah. He was a tremendous man of faith. He went to mass 2 or 3 times every week, and he and I got to be, I think, as close as Vinny would allow anybody to get to him. He was a complete family man. And one of the highest honors anybody's ever bestowed upon me was when he passed away. And his funeral was by invitation only, because if they left it open to people, it would have been chaotic, you know. Oh, yeah. And I got a call on a Saturday from Steve Brenner, who was a longtime member of the Dodger front office, said the Scully family has asked me to call and invite you and your wife to Vin's funeral Monday here in LA. And we had to scramble to get a plane reservation and flew to Los Angeles and went to the funeral. And it was a high mass funeral. It was tremendous. No celebrity spoke, which is highly unusual when a celebrity passed away, as you know, David, out there. Yeah. Yeah. But his family was involved in speaking the roles in the funeral, and it was just spectacular. And we had such good conversations together. In a lot of ways, he was a mentor to me, because anytime I had a question about my business that impacted me, the first person I would ask would be Vin Scully, and he never failed me. I'm honored to tell people that he was a friend of mine, that I worked alongside him for many years. Yeah. And so for you to say what you say, that's a real compliment, and I really appreciate that.
It's really
neat. Let me tell you, I'm like I said, I'm a Dodger fan because I grew up in Los Angeles.
Sure.
Didn't take long to get down there to Dodger Stadium. But every time I heard a Dodger game, I heard Vin Scully.
Yep.
Play-by-playing, somebody hitting a home run. He just made it very, very clear.
Yeah.
And just like you, man, you make it very, very clear when you talk about the sport, that you do. And it's not even a job. It's one of those things, man, that you just you've got it. When I started playing football and I came to Cincinnati and under Dick LeBeau came up to me and he told me, you know what, man? He always called me 33. 33, you know what? You got it. And I go, well, of course, coach, I got to play, man. He said, no. I'm not talking about got to play. He says, you got that instinct to find the ball, to have a nose for the ball.
Right.
Have a thought process to get the ball down. And that was my rookie year when he said that to me. And I said, you know what, if I could just play this game the way this coach is coaching it. And that's where he came in with all the zone blitz,
sure,
all the pressures that he has ever done. He started that with me. And he said, two things are going to happen with us. One, if you don't do your job, I'm going to be fired. You're going to be on the trading blocks. Or two, you do your job, you're going to make me look good. Not me look good, but make him look good.
Yeah, right.
I'll tell you something. That's where I see, when I say that, I say it, if I was seeing you, at a golf tournament, if I seen you somewhere, I would say the same thing.
Sure.
Thank you.
I don't know a whole lot of broadcasters. I hear them, but I know you and I know Vin Scully, and I appreciate you coming on our show. Dave, you ready?
My
Let's get
pleasure.
this thing going, man.
No,
Marty got us fired up. Let's go. Coming out of retirement. Let's go, Marty.
Here we go. What Vin Scully was to announcing baseball games, I think Mel Torme was to music. It was almost like listening to Velvet. It's the closest I can come to that. And let me before I ask you a quick question here, Marty, let me tell you this. Back in certain days, baseball wasn't quite as exciting as it was right now. There were games that would drag on or etc. But I have to tell you, there were times I kept listening to games that I could have cared less if the game was it was decided already, whatever. But I kind of kept listening because I knew something was coming out of you. At some point in time, something was coming out of you that would either make me laugh or go, no, he didn't, but I kept listening.
Well, being a left-hander sometimes is a bane of my existence, David. And that's why I would tell people, you never know what you're going to hear, and it may be totally unrelated to the game of baseball, but we'll try to make it as interesting as we can.
Great.
Marty, I also think I know we're going on, man.
That's all right.
We got Marty. This is Marty. This is not
Marty. It's like Christmas morning for us,
That's
Marty.
It. Christmas morning.
You're just going to have to put up with us. That's all there is to it.
That's all. Hey, I'm good for it, boys.
You know what's nice? What's nice about when Marty was, once again in the spotlight as a radio personality and calling games, I like to listen to Marty because Marty talked about everything during the game. Bad pitching. Look at that throw. The catcher doing this. The third baseman can't. Coach is not yelling and screaming, blah, blah, blah. And see, I like that. I like that because you're giving me more insight of not just the game that's being played. This is years of experience of listening to you broadcast and say what you say. You had, a bad pitch for us is a bad pitch, but Marty comes up with a word that makes that bad pitch look even worse than it was. And I think for me, as a spectator listening to Reds games or listening to Marty talk, even at this golf tournament the other day, Joe Nuxall's golf tournament, I was standing before I came up to you, talk to you about coming on the show. I was kind of standing there listening to you, Seg, and another gentleman talk. And I closed my eyes and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm at the Reds baseball game and I'm listening to Marty Brennaman talking about something else. And I'm going, no, I'm not at a baseball game at Joe Nuxall's tournament. But there was Marty and that voice. And I'm going to tell you something, man. You got, people say voice for radio or face for radio. Marty, you got it all, dude. You got it all. And I appreciate you.
Thank you,
buddy.
All right, Dave.
It's just so funny.
Good stuff, man. Good stuff.
If you look over my shoulder, other side, I guess, over here.
Right.
There's a picture of Sparky Anderson, and he autographed it for me. And had a chance to fly back. I had a show at UCLA, and I was speaking at UC the next day. And I got bumped up to first class, and I get on the plane, and lo and behold, I'm on the aisle. Who's on the other aisle? Sparky and his wife's against the window. And I opened up my computer. I said hello, and I didn't bother him. And I start working on my show for UC. And he looks over at my screen. He goes, "Wait, son, what do you do?" I said, "I'm known as the dating doctor. I talk about healthy relationships. I try to have college students form relationships so they stay in college." He goes, "Honey, switch seats with him." I'm like, "Sparky, no, I am not switching seats." She goes, "Honey, it's okay." So he moves over against the window. I sit on the aisle, and for 4 hours, I'm talking with him, and he will not let me ask him a question about him. Every once in a while, I'm trying to go, "Sparky, what about?" He's like, "No, this flight isn't about me, son. This is about you." Wow. And I get that same level of humility from you.
Yeah.
Well, that's another compliment, which I appreciate, because when I came, there were certain people that made the transition from Al Michaels to me a lot easier than it otherwise might have been. Johnny Bench, Pete Rose, Joe Morgan, Tony Perez, Sparky Anderson, and obviously Joe Nuxall. And they bent over backwards to make the transition easy, because people loved Al Michaels. And I think in the ensuing years since Al left after the 73 year and went on to bigger and better things, people understand, one of the truly great talents of all time in my business. But Sparky and I became very close, really close. And he would tell me things that were going on inside the Reds organization related to the game of baseball that he was not supposed to tell me, but he knew I would never break his confidence. And what it did was, over the years that we were together, it gave me a better perspective when I was broadcasting a game, why maybe he made certain moves that he did, without revealing to the people, well, I knew all about this because Sparky told me, because he was not supposed to tell me. And when he was fired after the 78 season, I broke down and cried. It was the first time anybody that had meant something to me had been let go. That's when I really learned the hard knocks of what our business is all about. Yeah. Players get released, managers get fired, coaches get fired. And I was probably too close to him. But I look back on the years that I spent with him, and I would not take anything for them. He was an underrated manager. I had people come up to me and say, well, my 9-year-old kid could manage that club, that Big Red Machine Club. I said, with all due respect, you obviously don't know much about this game. Yeah. There were a lot of things that went on inside that clubhouse that people had no knowledge of. Quite honestly, Pete Rose and Johnny Bench did not like each other. To their credit, when the time came and the bell rung and they went out to play, they put all their personal issues aside and went out and played. And Sparky was a great manager, and he proved that when he left Cincinnati, went to Detroit, and won a world championship with the Tigers. Yeah. He was truly a neat guy, David, and I'm glad you found that out firsthand by spending time to talk with him, because he was really a cool guy.
It was 4 hours of time, Dave. 4 hours of time.
The cutest thing was, I said to his wife, ma'am, I'm not going to take your spot. She goes, honey, please take that spot for 4 hours. So,
yeah. She knew how Sparky was.
Oh, yeah.
And Carol knew how he was.
David, do you mind if I ask a question here really quickly?
Go ahead, buddy.
Marty, you arguably were calling the games for one of, if not the best team that's ever graced the fields of Major League Baseball, arguably in the discussion of one of the best, the Big Red Machine.
Yeah.
When you were calling those games, were you cognizant that you were watching a field full of future Hall of Famers, or is that not something you think about? Or as time went by, did you say to yourself, wow, I'm getting to call something pretty special?
Wow.
That's a great question, David. I at the time, I don't think I realized how great that team was, but I had nothing to compare it with, because they win the World Series back to back in 75 and 76. That was only my second and third years as a broadcaster with the Reds, having come in 74. But as years went by and I got a chance to look at other good ball clubs, it gave me a better perspective of what an honor it was for me to have been able to be at Mike's side for all of those games in the years that team was together. And so, but at the time, I didn't really understand how truly great it was. I only know this, that in the years in which they were excelling, it was not uncommon at all for us to have a game at Riverfront Stadium, and those infrequent times in which they might have been behind by 3 or 4 runs in the 7th inning, and you'd have 52,000 people in the ballpark and nobody would go anywhere, because they knew that sooner or later something would happen and they would come back and win. And more often than not, they were right. People were so conditioned to watching that team perform, and they excelled in every single area. There was no weakness on that club. They had great speed. Mm-hmm. They played sensational defense. They had great offense. They had a tremendous togetherness on the field. They knew how to play the game fundamentally, and their starting pitching was really underrated because their bullpen was so dominant. But it was an incredible thing to watch them play, and they never rubbed any team's nose in it. Sparky had a rule that if we're 6 runs or more up from the 6th inning on, he said there are 2 things we do not do. And he said, if you go against my rule, you're coming out of the game and you're going to be fine. You don't hit a 3-0 pitch, and you also do not steal a base. He said, we're not out there to embarrass the other team. We're out there to win. And everybody had great respect. The only exception to that was the Los Angeles Dodgers, because those 2 teams genuinely did not like each other. And the people talk about the Yankees and the Boston Red Sox in the last 15 or 20 years, and one of the great rivalry, or maybe the greatest rivalry of all time in baseball. That rivalry didn't hold a candle to the Dodgers and the Reds back in the 70s.
No, I can recall that because, born in 64, 10 years later, I'm 74. My dad's taking me to the Dodgers game. And every time a team came in town, there was one team that the LA people did not like, and it was Cincinnati.
That's
And
right.
in being from Los Angeles, one of my former teammates, Joe Kelly, who went to high school, my rival high school, I don't know why Joe does it, but Joe's a Dodger fan, and every time the Dodgers come in town, he is at the Reds game with a Dodger jersey on. And I tell Joe, I say, Joe, you and I are teammates. We can't be supporting LA and Cincinnati. You don't wear that stuff. You could wear it to you. You could drive to the game, take the jersey off, and leave it in the car, but you can't walk in the Red Stadium with a Dodger jersey on. He does it all the time. Does it all the time. No doubt. He does it all the time.
That was so funny. He's one of the funniest guests we've ever had, and it's hard to get a word in edgewise when he's on. But Marty, you obviously called some of the most wonderful athletic plays that people have ever seen. Just look at the athletes that you covered. My question for you is more, were there certain moments that you look back at your career that were more emotional moments for you? Like, I did a little vetting of you before you came on, and was it your first game ever that Hank Aaron broke Babe Ruth's? Was that one of your first calls?
He tied the record. No, he tied the record, 7-14. And that was 4 batters into my first game. In the first inning, opening day, 1974. And it was really funny. Jack Billingham, who is a dear friend of mine, he and his wife are great friends of Amanda and mine. And I give him a hard time all the time because he fell behind to Henry 3 balls and no strikes with 2 men on base and 1 out at the top of the first inning of my first game. And Billingham tried to throw a fastball by him on the 3-1 pitch, and Henry lined it over the left field wall for a 3-run home run. And if I have a nickel for every time I've said to Billingham, and we've been together, let me ask you one question, because I still wrestle with the answer to this. How can a human being be so stupid as to try to throw a 3-1 fastball by Henry Aaron? Are you kidding me? Well, he's heard it so much that he just blows me off and doesn't even respond. But when we finished the inning, Joe turned to me during the commercial break and said, "What the hell do you do for an encore?" I said, "I don't know." I said, I was just at the right place at the right time when it happened. And it's even more of an honor for me because I don't know that I've ever met a person who had such great dignity about him and carried the banner of what a Major League Baseball player should be than Henry Aaron. People ask me today, and I'll say it till my dying day, because I consider Henry Aaron the all-time home run leader. I don't consider Barry Bonds. One, Barry Bonds was not a nice guy. Secondly, I don't think there's any question that he helped himself with performance-enhancing drugs. Aaron didn't do anything but be a classy guy and approachable. He was just a wonderful human being, and to be able to make a call as historic as that one was a thrill for me, being a young rookie broadcaster in his first game. So that it was a double treat because of the kind of person that Aaron was.
Yeah. So let me ask you this question, Marty. So I always ask all my guys this here when we get on here. I'm going to take you back.
Okay.
Back to that morning when Marty Brennaman says, "I'm done with broadcasting." I'm going to take you back to that day because in the spotlight, which we both were, me as a football player, you as a radio broadcast, when I retired or when I was finished playing football, how I left the game, whether it was, the Raiders didn't want to pick me back up. Most people think that I got injured, and it wasn't that. It was just that the Raiders didn't want to pick me back up. But when you got up that next morning after your last broadcast, your last Reds or radio broadcast,
right?
Take us back to that day, man. What did that day look like, and how did you act after you knew? One, did you walk away from it, or did they tell you to get out, or you just go ahead and explain to us and the viewers of that day what happened?
Well, I'll take you up to it, because in January of 19, I went to Phil Castellini I called him one morning, and I'd made this decision. This decision had been working for a number of months. We had finished the 18 season. We were in the wintertime between 18 and 19. And I told Amanda, I said, next year is going to be my last year. I'm done. And so I really did not want to go out with a lot of hoopla. Yeah. I wanted to do the season, and then I'm done. And I made a mistake because I told too many people privately who I thought could keep a secret. And it got back to Phil, and he called me and he said, we need to sit down and talk. I said, okay. So in January of 19, I went into his office and he said, I'm getting some rumors and I want to find out if they're true. I said, okay. He said, is it true that you're going to retire? I said, yep, this is my last year. And he said, well, he tried to convince me to work 5 more years so I could have 50 years as a Reds broadcaster. I said, with all due respect, and I appreciate that, I said, I've made up my mind. I'm good with this decision. I just don't want a lot to do made over it, because the mere fact, the way I felt, I was here for 46 years. There are not too many guys that work for the same club and the only club in their big league careers for 40. I think there are 5 or 6 of us that work for one team and one team only for 40 plus years. And so we went round and round. We were fine with it. He said, we'll do you proud and we'll do it in a classy way. Well, nobody was better at putting things together in that realm as Phil Castellini is. He's a great guy in terms of putting events together that are memorable. You can go back to the All-Star game the Reds played a number of years ago. I don't know there's ever been a better All-Star game in terms of the events and the way it went down, and the home run derby that Todd Frazier won, and the whole 9 yards. So the season goes on, and the last day comes, and I know it's going to be tough. I knew I was never a really emotional person. I used to kid Joe about Joe Nuxhall could cry. I'd say, you could cry at the door, a door opening or the sun coming up. I said it wouldn't make any difference. And I really felt that it was not a macho thing to do for a man to cry. I have learned in the ensuing years that it's about the most macho thing that a man can do, is show that type of emotion about something that he cares so much about. I could cry at the drop of a hat.
Oh, yeah.
And I knew that day was going to be tough, and it was. I broke down and cried when the game ended. I got through it. I went home, and when I woke up the next morning, I was good. I was playing golf with 2 of my grandsons, which made it even better. And I got to be honest with you, I've never looked back. I've never regretted the decision. And I'm quick to tell people when they say, do you miss it? And I say, no, I don't miss it. I stay on top of the game. I have to, I feel, because Tracy Jones and I do a radio show on WLW radio twice a day, and I need to know what's going on and that type of thing. But I've not missed broadcasting games. I've not missed being, quote, out of the spotlight in that capacity. Yeah. And a lot of that has to do with the woman I'm married to. And you and I can relate to that, because you got a hell of a woman too.
Yes.
And
yes.
I think it makes a major difference that you have someone like that. We've traveled the world. And I rarely go to the ballpark. I've been down there 4 times this season, and 2 of them were last week when the Cardinals were in town. I stay in touch with some people that I care about in the game. But it was just time for me, David. 46 years is long enough to do anything.
It's a long time, man.
Yeah. And so it's like a chapter in my life that I turned the page on. I was blessed by God to be hired in a city as wonderful as the one we live in. You and me are as good an example as anybody, because you're a West Coast boy. You could have packed up and gone back to the sunny climes of Southern California. You stayed here. And yes, I could have done the same thing. I love this city. I feel like well over half of my life has been spent in this town. And I love Cincinnati as much as anybody alive. And I'm thankful for the opportunity that was given to me here. And I hope that people understand how much I feel about our community and the people that live here.
Yes.
Marty, I know that you don't know me as well as you know David Fulcher, but I travel the world as well as a speaker, and people ask me all the time, like, David, why don't you move south? Why don't you move to the West Coast? Why don't
Right.
you? I love it here. I
Yeah.
think the people are. It's a beautiful place to live. The people are gracious, and you know what's neat for you, Marty, is when people think back to the Big Red Machine, they're going to think of the team, but I think exactly at that moment they're also going to think of you.
Well, I
What's
got to
a
be
part of
honest.
that?
I got to be honest with you about something. I was fortunate to go into the broadcasters wing of the Hall of Fame. It's almost impossible to think now. It's been 24 years since it happened in 2000. And I'm convinced, and I said this, people, I'm not going to lie to people. Personally, myself, I've had people say, do you think you broadcast the baseball well? I said, yeah, I think I broadcast it very well.
Sure.
However, I think the fact that I was associated with that team, the fact that I was a voice of that club in 75 and 76 meant as much as anything, my talent, whatever it might be, to going in when I did. I was the second youngest broadcaster ever to be brought into the broadcasters wing. The only one that was younger than me was Vin Scully. And 24 years later, it's the same thing. I'm still the second youngest. But I don't pat myself on the back and said, your talent's the thing that got you there. It might have certainly helped, but there were a combination of things, and being associated with that Big Red Machine team had a lot to do with it.
It's really neat. I think there's a question that has to be asked, and then I'll turn it back to you, David Fulcher. This has to be asked, and it's going to cost me the next time I see this human being, I promise you. What was it like, Marty, to be up in the booth and be infiltrated on a daily basis by Seg Dennison? I know he sneaks up there in the booth, and you're trying to call a game, and around Seg, he's a human rain delay. I mean, what's it like to be around Seg?
I got to tell you a story about him. And he and I talked about it the other day at Joe Nuxall's golf tournament, because I told him I had to relate this story to some friends of mine when his name came up a week or two ago. This is way back. This is in 1978 or 79. Wow. And I'd established a relationship with Seg, who used to run the board at the ballpark at the WLW for all of our games. And he would punch all the buttons and turn all the knobs and all that kind of stuff to keep us on the air. Well, we had a problem one night, technically at Candlestick Park in San Francisco. And I was all bent out of shape because we were going in and out and we were breaking up. And finally, during a commercial break, I picked up the phone and called the control room because I knew he was going to answer the phone. And my language was rather eloquent.
You were ready to go.
Yeah, but it was also very
one good hit left.
And the vocal level was a little bit high. And he let me go on for about 15 or 20 seconds. And all of a sudden, he hung up on me. And I said, Seg, where in the hell are you? Seg? And I turned to Joe. I said, that SOB just hung up on me. So the next half inning, I called back. And I was very calm. I said, Seg, let me give you a piece of advice. And he said, yeah, what? I said, don't ever do that again. Don't ever do that again. And we laugh about it today. David Coleman, you know what kind of person he is. He'd give you the shirt off of his back. He's the sweetest guy that ever was. And he is and our engineer, Dave Armbruster, who was with me for like 35 of the 46 years, or maybe more than that. They have been dear friends of mine forever. Seg is a staple at 700 WLW radio. I don't know what they do without him being there on a daily basis. So I have mostly good things to say about our mutual friend.
Wow. Let me tell you something, man. Seg, man, is got to be one of the funniest guys in the world.
I know.
But let me ask you this question. I think you said something about this earlier, and we always ask our guys about this here. Faith. How much has faith played a role in your life, if any? If it has played a role in your life, can you explain that to us?
You know what? You ask a great question, David. You're talking about FATE, fate, right?
Yes.
And I tell people this all the time. I'm not the most religious person in the world. I wish I was, but I'm not. I believe in the afterlife and blah, 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 blah. I believe in every bit of that, but I don't go to church very often. But I truly believe when you are born that our greater power has your life laid out already the first breath you take on this earth. And where you end up will be a situation whereby you will be confronted with decisions that you have to make along the way. And you are going to make the decision that he wants you to make in order to put you where you end up. And there were a couple of situations that have occurred in my life that make me look back and say, if I'd have gone the other way, I would have never ended up in Cincinnati. And so I truly, I'll never forget, I was working at a 1,000-watt radio station in North Carolina in 1972. I'd gone to work for him at 60. No, that's not right. I was at this 5 years. I was there. It was in 1968, 69. And I was in this little town, Salisbury, North Carolina, which is about 20 miles from Charlotte. And Davidson College was coached at that time by Lefty Drizel. And they were nationally ranked. Small college right outside of Charlotte. On the banks of Lake Norman, and they were top 10 team for like 4 or 5 years running. They had great players, they had All-Americans, and they were carried on the radio by a 50,000-watt radio station in Charlotte, WBT Radio. And I was offered the job as voice of the Davidson Wildcats. The station's sports director was a guy named Jim Thacker, who was very, very firmly ensconced in that area, and also because he was doing ACC basketball on television with Billy Packer, and then he was sports director of WBT. And I knew that Jim Thacker was not going to go anywhere. And as long as I was there, I was going to be second fiddle to Jim, even though I was doing Davidson College games on the radio. So I opted not to take that job. And people thought I was crazy. They said, "You're turning away from a job that you'll be in a spotlight of sorts because they were a nationally ranked ball club." I said, "Yeah, but I don't know what kind of future I'd have at that station as long as Jim was there." And Jim and I were friends. And I realized now that had I taken that job, I would have never gotten to Cincinnati. I just know that would have never happened. And that's the reason why it made me come to grips with the fact that you're going to be forced to make decisions that, if you go one way, you'll never get to where you are going to eventually get to. And so, yeah, I believe very, very strongly, David Fulcher, and fate. I truly do.
Thank you, man.
Yes,
sir. Asked
that
question, man, because
that's a good question.
You know, my upbringing, faith, family, and football has always been my upbringing, and I think all three of those words, faith, family, and football, are all intertwined with each other. Because my faith has football in it. It has my family in it. My family has football in it and my faith in it. So I asked that question because, and once again, we're not here to judge anybody off of their religion or what they like. But, growing up, man, I had to Sunday morning, I went to church. Me, my mom, and my brother and my 2 sisters. My dad stayed at home. We did not miss a church on Sunday. As much as I wanted to stay home with my dad and watch football, but we went to church. And when we came home in California, football starts at 9:00 in the morning, which is
I know.
So everything is very early. So we would miss the game if we went to church because we went there early. And I just wanted to ask you, man, and I appreciate that. But I have one more, and then I'm gonna turn this over to David. And this is a question of first of all, Marty, did you play what sports did you play when you were a kid?
You know what? I played Little League baseball.
Okay.
I was not athletically inclined. I was not big. I went out for high school football as a freshman at a pretty good football school in Virginia. I think I weighed 98 pounds, and I went to practice. They didn't have a uniform that would fit me, so they put me in shoulder pads and shorts and cleats. And finally, the line coach, who became a great friend of mine after I got out of high school, he called me in one day and he said, "Marty, we're going to cut you." And he said, "We're not going to cut you because you did not show the desire to play. You worked your butt off." He said, "But son, you're going to get killed out there if we leave you out there." He said, "So we're going to," and that's the only thing I played was Little League baseball. That was it. But he told me, I never forget. He passed away a lot of years ago, but he probably did me a great favor because they would have broken me in two. But baseball, Little League baseball, was the only thing I played. That's it. That was it.
Marty, with my career, I've been to over 3,000 college campuses, and I was reading your bio, and I saw that you started off at, I think, William and Mary. You did some work there, and Virginia Tech, and I've been to seen the Hokie Stone many times, and William and Mary might be the prettiest campus in America.
Yeah.
I have a question for you about radio, and that's this. Those of us who were able to follow your career, and those of us who radio was a big part of our lives, there were indelible moments that are lasered into our brain because we heard you and others in that medium deliver them. Do you think that the youth of today, the last couple generations, are missing something because the pictures painted on radio are now right in front of them on their phones, on a video, on YouTube? Have we lost those indelible moments for these generations that they will lose because they're not hearing it?
Boy, you guys ask good questions.
Yes,
I definitely do, David Coleman. I definitely believe that what you just said is accurate. And that's not to demean radio in any case. I think you still have guys out there that broadcast Major League Baseball and other sports that are as revered by the people that listen to them today as they did back in my day and in Vin's day and Ernie Harwell and Jack Buck and all the old timers that are all gone. But, you have everything. If it's not on network TV or ESPN or whatever the case might be, you can come up and stream a game and watch whatever you want to watch. I cannot believe that there would be some college football or basketball game or something of that nature that you could not pull up on your telephone or on your iPad. So yes, I definitely think that those magic moments, when you heard Russ Hodges back in 1951 call the Bobby Thompson home run that was sent the Giants to the National League pennant after they'd been behind by 15 games on August the 14th. Those things are gone forever because more often than not, you're going to hear now when iconic moments occur, excuse me, in whatever sport it might be, you're going to hear the call by the TV guy. And I think we've lost something in that regard in radio because of the complete emergence and that sports has joined hands with TV in. So yeah, I think that's a great question, and I think probably it's going to be here as long as they TV a ball game.
Marty,
let me ask you.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead, Dave.
Marty, what about your call of the Reds coming back from 4 down against the Giants in the bottom of the ninth? I was able to go on and listen to that. There was a doubleheader, and it was in 13-9, and your call. And I think that you said that's when you felt like you were finally accepted.
Correct. That was my first year. And Al Michaels was very popular here, and we all understand why, because he was so blasted good. And Al and I are dear friends today. And I realized after I got here that this is the most provincial city that God has ever created in the United States of America. If you're an outsider, they are not going to be quick to embrace you. They're going to sit back and they're going to wait and they're going to size you up. And they're going to, if you're in my business, they're going to listen to you, and they're not going to lose their minds about how wonderful you are or how bad you are. They will be non-committal. But when the day comes that they decide that you are one of us, that it's like me and my brother, I can call my brother every foul name under the sun, but you better not do it, because if you do it, then you got to deal with me and my brother.
Wow.
And I think that night was a night that I realized that I had been accepted by this town, because it was a twilight doubleheader at Riverfront in '74 in July, I think, right after the All-Star break. And Friday night, and they were playing a 5:30 twilight doubleheader. In the first game, they went to the bottom of the ninth inning, trailing 13-9, and they end up rallying in the bottom of the ninth. Johnny Bench kept the inning alive when he hit a ground ball to first, and Dave Kingman was playing first base for the Giants. and he came up with a ball and he looked up to give it off to Randy Moffett, who was pitching, and Moffett had never left the mound. That was the last out of the game. That would have been, the game would be over, and Giants would win 13-12. We had one man on base, and they extended the inning and brought Tony Perez up, and Perez hit a 2-run home run to straightaway center field to win the game 14-13, and I lost my mind. I mean, I think I busted a vein or something, because I was
kept screaming, "The Reds win it! The Reds win it! The Reds win it!"
And all night long, I was told the next day, WLW radio people called in to ask to hear the call again, and I realized then that maybe I was doing something right, and that I had been accepted by the people in this town. And that was an impactful night for me, and that was probably a turning point in my own self-confidence, to make me understand that, as great as Al Michaels was, maybe there was something about Marty Brennaman's work that people had embraced. So you bring up a good memory for me.
Those famous words, man. This one belongs to the Reds.
Yeah.
Well, I love hearing that, man. That's when you know baseball back in the day was pretty good. Just when I hear that, this one belongs to the Reds. We're rolling now.
I always wondered why it wasn't on the stadium as well. And then I read that City Council said, no, the stadium doesn't belong to the Reds. It belongs to the people of Cincinnati. Marty, are you kidding me? That's the reason that you're saying is not right there with Joe's?
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. I wish I knew today, just for the heck of it, I wish I knew the members of the Cincinnati City Council that were responsible for that decision, because I'd love to call them and tell them how completely unmitigatedly stupid they were. I accept it as a typical political decision, and I went on with my life. It was not going to hurt me one way or the other. It would have been nice to be up there, but at the same time, if that's the way they felt, and that small thinking, because they didn't want people to misunderstand and make people would think that, well, maybe the Reds own that stadium and not the city of Cincinnati, so we can't have that up there. So that was the way it was, and so be it.
So I've got one question, Dave, and we can close this up. Marty, is there anything based off of your years of playing baseball? Is baseball missing? What are they missing today? If there's something being missed, what would you do if you were the commissioner for baseball today? That would change some things. And I know I'm not here to put anybody down. I'm just asking Marty Brennaman, if he was the commissioner for baseball, what do you think is missing over the last 30, 40 years that could be implemented today?
Well, I don't know, David Fulcher. That's a tough question. I don't know that we got enough time. Because you see, the game has taken a different road. They're traveling a different road now, with a preponderance of analytics, which is pervasive in all those sports, not just baseball, but football at the college and the NFL level, and basketball at the NBA and college level. It's there, and it's not going to go away. It's changed the game radically. My game now is all about home runs, strikeouts, and walks. And if you strike out 175 times in the season, that's okay. In the old days, that was not okay. Players were embarrassed to strike out. Today, that's not a problem. And that's a problem for me. I tell this story all the time. In 1975, Joe and I were in spring training doing a spring training game against the Pittsburgh Pirates in Bradenton. And we went down to the little house they had behind the left field fence, where they had lunch for the broadcasters and the media people before they went to work. And Joe and I were in there having a sandwich. And I hear this old guy railing and ranting and complaining about the nature of where the game is. And I asked Joe, I said, who in the heck is that? He said, that's Al Barlick, who was one of the great umpires of all time in baseball. And he's now a supervisor of umpires. I said, well, if he's so unenamored with the game of baseball, why the heck doesn't he get out? Well, 50 years later, boys, you're looking at him. That's me. I'm the Al Barlick. I tell that story all the time. David, I don't know. God bless him, the commissioner tries like heck, because he spearheaded so many different rules changes the greatest thing he's done, and it'll be part of his legacy when Rob Manfred retires. And that's going to be the pitch clock, because I think that's the best thing they've ever done with the game. People have said time and again, we're tired of watching 3.5-hour games where the final score is 2-1. And so the pitch clock has made a tremendous impact, a positive impact, I think, on the game. But the game's got a lot of problems. And I would not want to be, I'm not a big fan of Rob Manfred's. I think Rob knows I'm not, because I've been vocal about it. But I hate to have that job. I think it's a thankless job. The biggest single problem our game has, and I don't know how they can overcome it, is they are still wrestling with the way to figure out to get young kids back involved in this game.
Right.
Because as you well know, it's easy to go out and shoot a basketball. You don't need anybody out there but you and the ball and the hoop.
That's it.
Soccer, lacrosse, soccer, now lacrosse, everywhere.
Exactly. Lacrosse is the fastest growing sport in this country right now, with high school and youth league team. I got a grandson who was a 2-time All-State player at Marymount High School, and that sport is exploding. Baseball's having a tough time. And I think the long-range future of this game is going to largely be dependent upon figuring out a way to get young people back involved in this game again. But baseball has too many at the youth level, the traveling teams and parents pushing kids to be good and getting them involved. And it ain't like the old days. And I think all of us are old enough in varying stages of our lives that we can remember. I remember when I was a kid growing up, my mom and dad would throw me out of the house in the summertime at 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning. We'd go out and we'd play baseball until we got called in for lunch, and then we'd go back out and play, and we'd be called in for dinner. I mean, that doesn't happen anymore. And whether it's good or it's bad, I don't know. But this game's got a lot of challenges, and it's going to be up to the decision makers to figure out a way to keep this game, if not where it is, and move it on into a better stage of the history of this game. I'd hate to have to make those decisions.
Yeah. Well, buddy, I'm telling you something, man. This has been a good hour. This has been a great hour, man. When I saw you and I said, I've got to get Marty on there.
I appreciate you asking me. I really do.
We're going to talk some stuff today, man. And we have. Dave, you got anything else, man, for Marty?
Thank you for your time. And thank you for the moments. On behalf of everyone who won't have a chance to meet you personally, thank you for all the moments you gave us, for the respect and dignity that you have brought to Cincinnati and continue to do every day. And it's been a blessing to have you on the show.
Well, I appreciate it, David. You're two good guys. And David Coleman and David Fulcher, the offer still stands. You want to come in here and see this room sometime down the road in wintertime?
You can bank on that. I just want to see that Godfather poster closer up right there alone.
It's good.
We will take you up on that.
But I really appreciate you fellas having me on this program. I enjoy chatting with a couple of guys that I have great respect for, and God bless you. And I know, Fulcher, I'll see you time and again, because we always show up at golf events. So
yes, sir.
Stay in good health. Tell your wife I said hello. And thanks again for having me on.
No problem.
On behalf of David Fulcher and Marty Brennaman, I'm David Coleman, your co-host here on Overtime Life After the Spotlight. We have enjoyed this immensely. Thanks for being with us, and we'll see you on our next show.
You've been listening to Overtime with NFL All-Pro David Fulcher and co-host, award-winning speaker David Coleman on the Bootleggers Music Group Radio. Be sure to catch all our shows and music by downloading our app at bootleggersmusicgroup.com. All content is published and owned by the Bootleggers Music Group, LLC, and Zasco Publishing, and may not be duplicated without prior written consent. Executive Producer, Paul E. Jones. Bootleggers Music Group is pleased to announce the premiere episode of The Darla Z Show on September 23rd at 5:45 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with special guest Richard Rawlings from Gas Monkey Garage. Richard shares his story, the ups and downs, the success and failures. Also, we will be airing the video portion where Richard gives us a very special tour of the garage. September 23rd at 5:45 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Bootleggers Music Group Radio. Download the app today to hear this And all our episodes and music at bootleggersmusicgroup.com.
This is very easy. We're giving.
Did you say gasmonkey.com?
Gasmonkeygarage.com. We're giving this away too. But this is one of my latest acquisitions that I think is pretty funny. This is one of the Prince bikes from Purple Rain.
Oh, wow.
And
really?
it was built in conjunction with the help of,
Purple
yeah.
Rain.
You're a singer, that's right, I forgot.